And then came the Jonestown instance. Again, somehow these stories not only were stories, but they kept working their way into our private lives. On the Jonestown story, it started quite innocent. He was trying to make a name for himself. I had a kid from Mexico who needed an operation. He showed up at our station. He volunteered to pay for it, but he wanted to be on television to get credit for it. That we didn't do. But he became more and more paranoid as time went by. My housekeeper, who I trusted was a cousin and a friend, became ill. And she had a good friend from her church who was looking for a job. I didn't know her job, that her church was People's Temple, but it was. So the woman who came to work for us was a member of the security force at People's Temple. We probably never would have known that had it not been the insanity of what followed. But Mrs. Glover, we don't know her fate, but we know that she was a loyal member. We also don't even know if that was her real name. We worked with the Jonestown Project to find out what we could. She was one of the people that sold her house, signed everything over, including her Social Security, to Jim Jones.
Wow.
So it became more than a news story for us. And in that terrible, in November, those many years ago, came you who live here know what it means. And these are all stories that I had to report up on in some way and separate myself from when I was so close and so involved. So on the day that Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk were killed, my daughter was in City Hall as an intern for 2 years. And it was from her that I got the call. Mom, you gotta come. The mayor's been shot. I was making up to go to work. I dropped everything, made it to City Hall. Not so much about the news of it, but because I needed to know who my child was. I established that fact. She was downstairs with people I trusted. And then I had to change hats and become the anchor for that night's news. And it was one of the hardest nights that I pulled in television. We didn't have the fancy stuff for the commercial stations. But we had, which has been our greatest record. I was on my hiatus for commercial television at the time, working at KQED. And what we had was trust from the city officials. And it was in our studio that they assembled that night. And we had, what we told them was an opportunity to talk to the citizens, to let them know what they knew, and to express that we, as a city, this time in Feinstein Pledge, we determined to get over this one too. It was stuck together. So that was our next story. Now, so far as the mayor is concerned, my daughter had gone to school with Rebecca and his daughter. They were best friends. She had danced with him, and the daughter father danced at Convent of the Sacred Heart. That's where they went to school. So she was personally touched. So our stories are a little bit different from my friends' stories, because we seem to always be getting something personally wrapped into these things. And I'm not sure what made it possible for Bill and I as a family living through these tough times. But next came the AIDS epidemic. You know, where our touchstone was there, Randy Schultz, the guy who wrote the book on this, was the first openly gay television news reporter in the USA. I was on the show, and I started to learn about the risk. And then we went to the Ivory Coast. Randy's looking for, you know, the origins of AIDS. was traveling on a mission with Mayor Dianne Feinstein on a Sister City trip. And I spent a lot of time talking with him about this epidemic. And I ended up coming home and recording a video encouraging everyone who'd taken any risk to take the test. And today, even about a month ago, I still have men, middle-aged men, who come up to me and say thank you for helping to save my life. So I feel so fortunate to have been a conduit. And it continues, you know, off to South Africa to help with, because we were the first people to integrate here, to talk with the whites and talk with the blacks and tell them it was possible. We spent a couple of weeks traveling around that country doing that. And my last big story, I call it my last big story, although there have been many others, but it's big to this degree in terms of making a difference. A woman friend came over for dinner one night. She was telling me about a situation going on in Kenya, in Tanzania. I'm a local reporter working at Channel 4 here. So, you know, my chances, I'd already been to Cuba twice, but going to Tanzania and Kenya following the bombing was not exactly something a local television station did. But she said you have to go because there's a dispute between the Kenyans and the Americans, and there's a need for medical supplies that aren't coming in. And at that time, we didn't know about Al-Qaeda. We didn't know about what the future would hold for us. But we went because I worked for a rather silly guy that's still the news director of Channel 5 now, Dan Rosenheim, who gave me the permission because he heard the story. Kaiser Permanente chipped in about 1/4 ton of goods, and Air France gave us a plane, and we flew off to those countries, and we got there to bring those supplies and visit those people at hospitals when nobody else had worked out the paperwork of who should take care of the injured, since most of the injured were not in the U.S. Embassy. They were in an office building next door. So the two governments were fighting while people were suffering. So we got there, and we did what good we could. And we learned a great lesson about the power of media, because what helped those people was the counseling over radio with psychologists and ministers and others who talked to them through their pain, through the misery, and through what they thought was unfairness. So you heard about all my big breaks, my major opportunities to do things. And if you can believe it, along with all of that, I don't know how, but somehow I managed to live a regular life and become a volunteer. I serve on boards of directors and things right now, and that's going to have to be my retreat as I step back and try to find out what I can do besides keep telling everybody, hook me up with a steamship line. I want to get on a boat and make this speech as we're sailing the Caribbean. That would be a fail. But Bill and I are going to try to take some time and figure out what it is we ought to do. What can we do to be thankful and show thanks for all that has happened good for us, the opportunities that have come our way, for children that we still speak to and who speak to us, to your grandchild who is just, you know, of course, special. There's not a grandmother here that doesn't have a special child. So it's been a good time. Most of this is chronicled in this book. And so I hope you'll take the time to read some of it. It starts on a sour note. It ends where most of us are, wanting to make the best of whatever time we have. Sometimes that has been in what we call our duty of work. Now we would like to see how we will serve for our own pleasure. So thank you. there are any questions, yes, yes.
One day she went into elevator. She said, yes. She goes, said I heard about the years. She's gone now, so that's why I changed. But thank you for everybody that
Thank you.
thank you for coming today.
Yeah, that's mom's power. I meet so many people that tell me, I know who you are because I used to come home for lunch and my mother would have the news on. That's what I got to watch while I had my lunch. This paid off in Tanzania. I was trying to get into the Bondi embassy there. The duty officer was from Marin. Whose mom had made him watch me. So I got in and got pictures of the Bondi embassy in Tanzania, and only Tom Brokaw had been in there. Well, one thing about it, when you're busy, your kids can get ideas, you don't know where they get them from, but they get them. And I didn't know what my daughter was really thinking until one day somebody asked her if she's going into TV, and she says, nope, I'm going to be a producer. My mother's a consumer. So she owns her own business. And she's been in business for about 16 years, and she survived, you know, getting contracts and all of that. And has done a very good job of shaping her life. My son was more in the era of the 60s, and he takes a great job. He's a caterer and a chef. He wanted the freedom, you know, yes, to call his own shots. So both